Father Barnabas Powell is pastor of Saints Raphael, Nicholas, and Irene, Greek Orthodox Church of Cumming, Georgia, USA. Here's Father Barnabas with Sunday's homily.
It's an old joke, but if you've been around me long enough, you know those are my favorite kind. The son calls his mother, grown-up son calls his mother, and she's shocked and amazed. So, son, you're calling me. I'm so surprised you're calling me on the telephone. Oh, your old mother was just sitting here wondering, I wonder if any of my children still love me. I wonder if they'll just let me just sit here all alone in my house. Oh, but don't worry. Your mother doesn't care. It's all right. I've sacrificed everything for you, but it's all right. Don't you worry about your old mother. Don't ever worry about calling your mom or reaching out to her, anything like that. It's okay. I'll just suffer here in the dark and die quietly by myself. It's got all kinds of names. Some people call it Jewish guilt. Other people call it Roman Catholic guilt. I confess to you, the Greeks do it better than anybody. But the Greeks do everything better than everybody, right? I mean, come on. The Greeks. They were the first. They even insist on being first and being bad. Anyway. But it's an old joke. And the reason why it's so funny is because all of us have experienced in our lives being manipulated by guilt and shame. And let's face it, folks, we've done it. We've used guilt and shame to manipulate others. We've used guilt and shame. How dare... I tell my kids all the time, honeys, don't you know you have my last name? Everything you do is going to be a reflection on me. Of course, now that I have a teenage daughter, I double down on that as often as I possibly can. Because the reality is, there is a real sense in the fact that there really is a real dignity and honor in expecting dignity and honor. And yet, there is that fine line where it can go over into manipulation and guilt and passive-aggressive control. It really can go there, folks. And let's admit it, folks. Many times we don't know where that line is. Many times we cross that line long before we even realize I'm actually manipulating somebody by using guilt and shame to make them do what I want them to do. It's a horrible, besetting sin. And it is, brothers and sisters, at the root of much of the broken relationships or ineffective relationships or passive-aggressive relationships or codependent relationships that many of us experience in our lives. Our bosses will use it against us. Our families will use it against us. Our children will use it against us. Our parents will use it against us. Guilt and shame weaponized to control. And I confess to you, brothers and sisters, I know for a fact that is something that I have to stay awake to, even as a priest. Because it's very easy for me to just simply say to you, naughty, naughty, or shame, shame. And tell you, well, you ought to be nicer people. You ought to be good people. You ought to be wonderful people. And yet, brothers and sisters, make no mistake about it. Hear me this morning. The purpose of the Orthodox faith is not to make you a good person. It's not to make you a good person. This is not another behavioral modification philosophy to get you to behave and make your bed and be a good boy or a good girl. That is not the purpose of the Orthodox Christian faith. The purpose of the Orthodox Christian faith is to divinize you. Wow, Father, that's a big word. What does it mean? It means to make you by grace what Christ is by nature. You are destined to be the companion of the uncreated God. Anything smaller than that, and be something else. There's tons and tons, like I said last week, there are tons and tons of good religious philosophies in the world that will help you modify your behavior and don't bite and don't hit and say nice words and don't be mean. Did you know that Twitter has now come up with a new algorithm to try to cut back on the meanness on Twitter? I, for one, welcome our new algorithmic overlords to control our speech and to steal our freedom. But that's a sermon for another day. If you want a philosophy to have a behavior modification to make you lose weight, or to be a nice person, or to not be mean, there are tons of philosophies that can do that. The purpose of the Orthodox faith, my angels, is to make you like Jesus Christ. That's the purpose of religion. The Orthodox religion, anyway. It's to equip you to go into battle every day with the forces of chaos and the demonic darkness of the world in my own heart. Any other purpose for religion, and you're doing something other than Orthodox Christianity, folks, I'm telling you. Why do you think the church, in her wisdom, gives us these Sundays following the Feast of Pascha? We said that the Sunday of St. Thomas gives, we are taught about the power of the resurrected life of Jesus to overcome the power of doubt. The Sunday after that is the Sunday of the myrrh bearers, overcoming the power of timidity to keep you small. That's the resurrected life of Jesus Christ. The resurrection of Jesus is supposed to give you the power to overcome timidity and fear. And then last week, we heard about the Sunday of the paralytic, where the resurrected life of Jesus is meant to give you the power to overcome paralysis and procrastination, and to become by grace what Christ is by nature. And now, on this Sunday of the Samaritan Woman, the church insists that you confront the purpose and the power of the resurrection of Jesus to give you the power to overcome guilt and shame in your life. There is nothing that is more debilitating to a person than carrying around the weight of guilt and shame. I've seen people come into my office, my church office for counseling all the time. Oh, Father, I'm a bad... Because let's face it, folks. And I tell you, if you come to confession, you'll hear me say this to you. You're scheduled for confession, right? Anyway. The two things that are constantly battling, that I'm battling when I'm dealing with people in confession, is the reality that's also true of me, that most of the time I'm either too easy on myself or too hard on myself. I'm either too easy on myself and giving myself a pass with behaviors that reflect a brokenness in my own soul that I have not confronted. Or I'm beating myself up and saying, I've done that same sin again. I'm a lousy, worthless, no good, rotten, filthy sinner. And both of those illnesses build a wall between me and my close relationship with God. Because if you're constantly ashamed, you don't want to be around the God whom you think is ashamed of you. What a trick of the evil one to keep you distant from your only source of healing and salvation. What a brilliant trick and lie, and damnable lie at that. To say to you, oh, you've disappointed God. You've let God down. You've done the same thing over and over and over again. God must be so tired of you. Lie, 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 lie. If you can take God's peace and God's confidence, you're God. And I know most of you, and you ain't. And that's bad grammar, but it's good theology. The reality is, brothers and sisters, guilt and shame weighs down the soul to the point where you do not run to the only source of your help that can save you. This morning, as we see this Samaritan woman, a woman who has a bad reputation in the town, that's why she's showing up at the 6th hour instead of the cool of the morning to draw water. She's a Samaritan, which already makes her, in the eyes of the Jews, a half-breed. She's not kosher at all. worse than a Gentile in the eyes of pious Jews of Jesus' day. The pious Jew would walk around Samaria rather than walk through it, to keep from being made unclean by being near a Samaritan. Lord have mercy. And the reality is, brothers and sisters, I don't know of many of us that have moments in our own lives that when we recall it, we really do kind of sink down in shame. I wish I would have never done that. I wish I would have never done that. They say that one of the greatest things that you can come to at the end of your life, one of the greatest horrors of your life, is the horror of regret. If I would have only. If I would have just. Imagine having that constantly whispered in your ear all the time. You're not good enough. You're no good. You're not worthy. You're not worthy. You're not worthy. And allowing that whisper to keep you away from Him who can save you. The Samaritan woman was at the right spot at the right time. In fact, Jesus does something for this Samaritan woman. Watch this. Jesus does something for this woman who has a bad reputation. She's had 5 husbands, and the guy she's living with now ain't her husband. He does something for her He does for no one else. This is the first time Jesus does this, and He does it for this Samaritan half-breed woman of ill repute. He tells her who He is. Woman, if you only knew who was talking to you, you'd ask Him for living water. Oh, really? Living water? May I have some, please? Go get your husband. Oh, I don't have a husband. Well, you're right. You've had 5. And the guy you're with now ain't. Oh, you're a prophet. Yeah. Well, you can say that. We know that when the Messiah comes, He'll tell us these kinds of things. Honey, the guy talking to you is Him. First time in the Scriptures where Jesus comes out and says, yes, I'm the Messiah. And He does it to this half-breed woman of ill repute. So for centuries later, we're talking about this precious, broken down, guilt-ridden woman who skips away, leaving her water bottles there. Skips back into town, filled with joy, come and see a man who has told me everything I've ever done. Imagine that. The whole town knew all the stuff that she had done. But now, her humility and her encounter with Christ set her free from the power of guilt and shame to keep her bent over and hidden. And when you encounter Jesus Christ in this way, my angels, you will lay down the false ignorance and blind slavery of trying to hide the fact of who you really are and try to stay away from Him who you think is angry with you. Because the good news this morning is God is not angry with you. God is not angry with you. God is not disappointed in you. God is not ashamed of you. God loves you so much that He gives us the story of the Samaritan woman to say to us, this woman's life was broken and crushed by guilt and shame, and Jesus tells that woman who He really is. This morning, on this Sunday of the Samaritan woman, Jesus Christ wishes to tell you who He really is. He's the Messiah, the Christ, the one who has come to save you from guilt and shame and the slavery of guilt and shame. The resurrection of Jesus Christ destroys the power of guilt and shame to enslave you to a too small life. This morning, where in your life are you feeling guilt and shame to the point that you're hiding from God? Make no mistake, He knows where you are. And Jesus Christ wants you to be free. You can be forgiven. You already are. You already are. Now, start living like it. Amen.
You can follow Father Barnabas on YouTube or on our church website at stsrni.org. Thank you for watching.